Canada imposes sanctions on the president of Belarus, while Trudeau warns of a climate reckoning in the UN. This is the Great White North Report. Alright, yesterday, Canada, as well as the UK, imposed sanctions on the president of Belarus, Lukashenko. He's been the first leader charged under the UK's new global human rights sanctions regime, and Canada joined in that. So they imposed sanctions on President Alexander Lukashenko, his son, and 6 other senior government officials following the disputed presidential election and a crackdown on protesters in Belarus. Interesting. Canada is willing to impose sanctions on Belarus, but will not do the same to the Chinese Communist Party. The Canadian government is being very hypocritical in implying this because no one's threatened by Belarus. Belarus threatens nobody, while the CCP threatens everybody. For those who don't know, Belarus is in Eastern Europe. It was once part of Russia proper until the collapse of the Soviet Union, and Belarus, which was one of the Soviet republics, decided to go its own way and declare independence. It's still pretty much under the influence of Russia, more so than the other ones like Ukraine and Lithuania. Now, this isn't the first time we've had sanctions against Belarus. In fact, they recently were taken off in 2016. Trudeau made the policy decision to shift it after a 10-year period during which official relations were limited following the flawed 2006 presidential elections, which included the harassment and intimidation of the opposition and suppression of protests by Belarusian authorities. So this is nothing new. Why are we surprised by this? And in 2017, we removed Belarus from the area control list, a sanctions regime which was initiated in 2006. So they eased trade with Belarus, leaving North Korea as the last country on a restricted list. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Belarus was described as dictatorial. Now it was reopened to Canadian trade. That will probably change in the next following months. And Lukashenko's been in power since 1994. He's been accused of ordering the arrest of activists and opposition candidates. Where have I heard that before? One of the most abusive regimes and continues to exist in today's Europe. It's okay if it happens in China, but not in Europe. So Canada's saying we don't accept the results of this rigged election and hold those responsible for the thuggery deployed against the Belarusian people to account. We will stand up for our values of democracy and human rights. Really, Canada denounces Lukashenko's inauguration in Belarus, preparing sanctions over human rights violations. Come on. We have yet to do the same to China. This year, the first few days of demonstrations, police arrested more than 7,000 people and used violence on protesters. Has anyone seen Hong Kong? Police did the same thing there, and it was almost over a year of protesting. So our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Francois-Philippe Champagne, said Canada considers that Alexander Lukashenko lacks the legitimacy to be the leader of Belarus. I could say the same thing about the Communist Party of China with their actions over the past couple of decades. The CCP does not care about the fundamental human rights of their own people. Basically, what is Belarus to us? Not really much. Belarus imports $24.65 million in 2018. They export $22.28 million back to us. So there is a trade gap of $2 million in Canada's favor. That's nothing. No idea what we import or export, but that doesn't sound like a heck of a lot. And this is why Trudeau and his government can apply sanctions without having any problems. The same can be said when we expanded our Venezuelan sanctions in 2019. We added 43 people close to Maduro, who was doing pretty much the same thing in Venezuela, grasping for power. And the Venezuelan economy tanked. And Canada chose to sanction people. Why? Because Venezuela means absolutely nothing to most Canadians. And we don't have a lot of economic ties with them. So it's pretty safe to do that, to stand on our principles. But when the money is being threatened on our side, we stay silent. Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are still being held just because Canada arrested Meng the Merciless Guangzhou at the request of the United States as part of our extradition treaty. These guys were arrested as part of a hostage diplomacy. Their basic human rights have been violated. These guys are in a prison. They've been interrogated, unlike Meng the Merciless, who lives in a $1 million mansion. There's 2 of them, by the way, in Vancouver. The Trudeau government refuses to take the logical step of banning Huawei, as there are issues with it. It makes perfect sense to ban Huawei as in retaliation for what's been going on, as well as for the spread of the CCP virus. And on top of that, China has stopped buying Canadian products like canola seed. They put pork products, so they lifted that because of the swine flu going on there. They've also stopped lobster shipments. Who knows what else they're going to do? These are acts of war. At the same time, they're also put 1 million of their own people, Uyghur Muslim minority, in concentration camps. Now, if that's not a violation of human rights, I don't know what is. The Hong Kong protests resume over a proposed Chinese security law. They've passed the law. Hong Kong is now no longer like it once was. Their basic human rights that were guaranteed to them for 50 years are now gone before 25 years has been up. So this is Trudeau's hypocrisy all over again. He refuses to take tough actions on what he deems as essential trading partners. If anything, we should start disengaging from China and putting sanctions on members of the Chinese Communist Party, looking into their hidden assets here in Canada. There's over $11 billion in real estate being held by the CCP, and we should also take away their passports, their Canadian passports that they bought from us. So anyway, Trudeau at the United Nations address warned of climate reckoning and urges a shake-up of global establishments, because ever since we let China join these organizations, they have faltered. Like the World Health Organization, they really screwed up big time with this pandemic. And Trudeau says the world is in crisis not because of the last few months, but because of the last few decades, really. He's saying this is a wake-up call that we can't ignore. Older institutions are no longer sufficient. He's saying that the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement no longer serves well enough to protect multilateralism and international law. Well, who's been the biggest breaker of international law in the past 15 years? So he's saying he thinks that things have to change, okay. And he's using climate change as one of those. Well, look at the biggest polluters in the world. Now, I do give him credit for calling out people, but I wish he had given names. He didn't name them, but he called out Russia for where opposition figures are being poisoned while cyber tools and disinformation are being used to destabilize democracies. China, where innocent citizens are arbitrarily detained and fundamental freedoms are repressed. In Iran, where a plane of civilians is shot from the sky. The world is in crisis, and things are about to get much worse unless we change. Right now we have a chance, not a big chance, but a chance to shift course, to realize that the only way through this is together. Oh, Christ. He's living a pipe dream. We should rename Trudeau Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver. He's so full of shit. If you're going to call out people like that, at least give them a name. China could also be labeled for the second part of that Russian one. Cyber tools and disinformation to destabilize democracies. China is just as guilty of that. See, he refuses to name them. Though he mentioned them, everyone knows what he's talking about. He thinks if he doesn't name them, nothing bad's going to happen. He's afraid of these three countries. And unfortunately, fear is not something we need in a leader. If we're going to go ahead and sanction Belarus and Venezuela, we should at least apply the same principle to other countries like China and Russia. Start going after them. Trudeau is pandering to them and to those who support them, and he's hoping to strike big economic deals with them. But it's never going to work. It's not going to work in Canada's favor, and he refuses to see that. He's an elitist. Anyway, for all you Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think of Trudeau and sanctioning Belarus, and why we should sanction, and should we sanction China for the same thing. Till next time, this has been the Great White North Report.
The twain is ours. We're proud to be Canadian. We're awfully nice to strangers. Our manners feel our curse. It's cool in many ways to be Canadian. We won't say that we're better. It's just that we're less worse. Your beer is not too tasty and your weather can't be beat. We all fly south in the winter time to escape the snow and sleet. We're pleased to say that we've enjoyed all your southern charms, but we get sunburnt when we exercise the right to bear our arms. Proud to be Canadian. We're awfully nice to strangers, our manners